Today to this legislative breakfast. It's a great way to get out, meet our legislatures, for you to have a voice, see them face to face. I believe these been going on since the mid-80s. It's kind of been a tradition for us to get together, do different areas in the county on Monday mornings. And we invite our legislatures to come. And this morning we're lucky enough to have Chris Bray, who tends to show up to every one of these. And I'd like to give him a thank you. And I'd like it if you guys, we got the little red light system. If the red light comes on, please think about wrapping up your question. You have 2 minutes to answer, to ask your question, and 3 minutes that Senator Bray will answer your question. And please, let's stick to this so that we can get everybody through. Again, and then when you get up, please state your name and which town you're from, so that we know who's here and things like that. So again, thank you, and Chris, you have a few words.
Okay. Good morning, my name is Chris Bray. I live in Bristol. I'm one of your 2 state senators. I was 4 years in the House, then I came over to the Senate side where I've been for 12 years. 10 of those years I've been chair of Natural Resources and Energy. That's my morning committee, and then in the Senate you serve on 2. The afternoon committee I serve on is Finance. And I'm glad to be here. It's always good to see a good turnout, and I'm sorry that my other colleagues aren't here. Maybe some will come in a minute or 2, because there's a lot of topics, and I sort of know my neck of the woods, but not everything that's going on in the building. So.
Well, again, thank you for Chris for showing up. I do have to mention, he does show up to these. I just wish some other people could take the time, because this has been a tradition for tens of years. So thank you. Who has the first question? Go ahead. Just walk to the mic there and then speak plainly into the mic. Thank you.
Amy Douglas, Shoreham. I wondered, there have been a number of other issues that have overcome the interest in retirement pension funding, and I wonder what's been happening with that.
So the state got behind funding retirement pension, both for state employees as well as teachers, back during the Dean administration. And it wasn't until I came into the legislature in 2007 that they said, you know what, no more of that, because just like compounded interest can work in your favor, compounded debt does not. And so they fell way behind by, according to actuaries, like hundreds of millions of dollars. So we have been adding extra money in year after year and making those solvent. And I think they're all secure. The other thing that came up around retirement was the governor had a plan to require people to move to Medicare Advantage, but under law he actually doesn't have the ability to make that choice on behalf of state employees, for instance. That's part of their contract. So I think state employees have been allowed to stay on the medical coverage that they choose for themselves. You can move to it, but you weren't forced to move to it. So we're doing, I think we're still chipping away with a big debt, but we're backfilling each year. We always pay in all that we need, and then we're paying an extra to reduce that future debt.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Do we have another question? All right.
Tim Muskie from Addison. I guess we're all thinking about tonight and tomorrow, at least the folks that are in Addison Northwest School District. There were so many budgets that were defeated, and we're in a rush right now to pass or fail with something in Virgins based on whether or not the teachers would be forced to get an RIF, or a RIF, reduction in force notice. Is the legislature doing anything with that 20% increase we're having in our property taxes? Are they still working on it? And how should we go about voting tomorrow? I don't want the Walden project to go away, and that's what they cut. Doesn't seem like it's totally fair to only cut one thing and then tell us to vote again. How are we supposed to vote?
Thank you, Tim. I'm not here to tell anyone how to vote, that's for sure. But in terms of what's happened, how we got into the situation we're in is, people may recall that every budget in the state of Vermont every school budget is a local vote. And what happened across the state as a whole is that compared to last year to this year, the budgets in total statewide went up by $250 million. And that's with declining student enrollment. So there's the downward pressure in terms of number of students. At the same time, I think when I looked at a list of every school district, and the smallest increase was about 6%, the largest was 54%. The average was 15%. So 15% on a $2 billion budget is a lot of money. And what's driving it? A few factors. One of them, we're seeing roughly 15% increase in healthcare costs for faculty, teachers and staff. That's only a part of the budget, but that's still a lot of money there. Then the other thing that went on is, so that's an upward pressure. The other thing that's been going on is that in the last several years we had federal funds from COVID to help. They were called ESSER funds. They were to support schools because, remember, everyone all of a sudden had lots of technology costs to be able to start doing remote sessions or safe distancing, all sorts of programs, improved heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems to try to clean the air better. So lots of money got spent and budgets grew under that with those federal dollars. Those federal dollars are done, and so now people, it's like opening your wallet and finding less money in it, and people are going to have to spend less. How each district decides to spend less is, it's a district by district choice. At the state level, we will end up seeing, when all the votes are done towards the end of session, what the total bill is. And then the legislature's job is, okay, how do we raise enough money to cover that tab? So we have a role for sure, but we're not driving the bus in terms of what that number is. That comes down to school district by school district.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to sit down here.
Hi. My name is Barbara Wilson, and I happen to be chair of the ACSD school board. So I have a perspective on what drove costs up, okay? We were fortunate, really blessed. Our budget did pass. Overall, it did go up total, I think, 8.8%. But what you're talking about when you say 20% is the tax rate, right? And so what I did, being a math major, as we had started working on the budget, I have this massive spreadsheet, so I can tell you exactly what contributed to our increase. The first thing that has happened is we have a new Act 127 that was implemented this year. And basically what this act does is my light out already?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. What this act did was basically redistribute how the state pie is distributed, right? So that communities and districts that have more poverty, more needs, would get more of the pie than, say, a district like Addison Central, which we lost 13% of our share of the pie. So right off the bat, we have a 13% reduction in our share of the pie. Plus then, there's this thing called the yield, property yield, that basically defines how much each equalized pupil would get basically in funding before you have to raise taxes. Between those two things right off the bat, we would have had to, not changing a thing, lower our budget $3.5 million in order to keep at the same tax rate as what we had the previous year. So you're already in the hole, right? So then 3.5 million is a lot of staff. So on an average, let's say it's $100,000. I'm just pulling that out. $3.5 million is a lot of staff, right? So in our particular case, in addition to the impacts of Act 127, what also was happening is the result of healthcare increase of 16.4% was $750,000 increase on top of that, right? And then we are in the process of a contract negotiation, which we're a little nervous about. So we estimated, what we hope to be, but I think it's going to come in higher than that. And so we struggled to get it down, and we did. Then we had ESSER, right, which is the federal funding. We did keep some of those positions because I've been in the schools. We have mental health issues. We have all kinds of things that are happening in the school that is preventing education from happening. And so to take those positions all away would basically impact all our education. So from my perspective, we have to step back and not just like say it's too much spending and blaming it all on the school districts. It's what are the root causes of the problem, right? Why? And when I look at, in the last 5 years, because I have advocated for changes in healthcare, right? I've stood up here many a time. If I look over the last 5 years since I've been advocating, our budget at ACSD has probably gone up $3 million. That's a cumulative, right? In the last 5 years, just because of healthcare, right? So how is a school district supposed to continue to provide quality education where even just that one pressure alone is an issue, right? Because that's a lot of people per year that you would have to continue to eliminate. So it's kind of scary. And we can talk about school consolidations and all that kind of thing. That will possibly lower it temporarily, but then what's going to happen is we're going to be right back where we are unless we fix the root cause problems. And I think that's where we should be focused in the legislature, is really trying to figure out how to solve those pressures that all our districts are having to deal with. And the other big thing is now a lot of funding is going to private schools, and they don't have to educate, all kids. This, a public school has a mandate. They cannot refuse a child, right? So there's lots of issues. Plus then we have free lunch for everyone. We have all these things that are being taken out of the ed fund that reduces the size of the pie. That have been funded over the last few years that didn't have a new funding resource or some funding source. So that too is an issue. So I think, it's time to look at what the real problems are underlying it. And I'm really worried we're going to do a knee-jerk reaction and say we fixed it, and 2-3 years that we'll be in worse shape than we are now. So, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for that detailed report. Now, does someone have a question?
Ed Payne report. I thank Lee for the explanation. When we hear there was something said about consolidation, And when you got 50 students in a classroom, in a class building that was set up for 120, you know, when I was farming, if we reduced the herd, reduce the personnel. And we don't seem to be able to do that. The other question I have for Mr. Bray is, what are we doing on this motion, this initiative to get rid of trapping and loading the Fish and Wildlife Board with the sticks and twigs people that don't want anybody to do anything that they don't want to do? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed, for the question. And Barb, I feel like I should sit down with you and have a long conversation after about the pressures that you're seeing and how they show up in schools. Maybe we'll come back to that. To Ed's question about trapping, there's a bill S-258 that passed the Senate. People probably remember that a bill has to pass on the floor twice before it leaves the Senate. So it had its first vote on Friday, and that was 21-8. And so S-258, the Fish and Wildlife Bill, does two things. One, rebuilds the board, the Fish and Wildlife Board, and I'll explain a little bit about how and why. And the second thing is we had a moratorium on hunting coyotes using hounds, and that is, the moratorium is made permanent. It's not just extended. It's like, okay, that's the law going forward. There were other provisions in the bill. I've been listening to people since the summer about, well, depends on when you want to start the clock. I've been talking to people about this for a half dozen years, and we've been talking in committee and taking testimony off and on in a variety of hunting and fishing, trapping issues for 5-6 years now. But this bill focuses on two things. So the board, all wildlife in the state of Vermont, game and non-game, are owned in public trust. We all own, no one can own that fish and wildlife, and actually we all sort of own it together. We have an obligation to express in law, a stewardship obligation, try to keep a healthy wildlife in the state and keep a healthy habitat for that wildlife. So it's a overarching joint ownership, let's say. The Fish and Wildlife Board, which has been writing regulations related to that wildlife, because they have in their purview not just game, but all wildlife and habitats for them. 9.9% of Vermonters have a hunting license. I am a great supporter of hunting. This bill is all positive. It's not a negative bill at all. But when I've had many concerns expressed to me over the years that why, if all Vermonters own fish and wildlife, can only roughly 9.9% of Vermonters sit on this board that looks over not just game, but all wildlife? Why not more voices at the table? And so the bill addresses that, and it says, democracy, the goal, whether you're setting up any kind of board, panel, etc., a legislature, you try to get a mix of voices that represents everyone that's in the state, in the town, in the community. And right now, we haven't had that in the Fish and Wildlife Board. So this is nothing, again, I have nothing but respect for those who have served and served well on that board. This is not a negative comment about the board. This is, in a democracy, you try to have a voice for everyone at the table. So this resets the table. And how does it do that? The governor currently has 14 appointees, one per county. The bill it says the governor has 14 appointees, 1 per county going forward. No change there. It adds one new at-large member appointed by the House, 1 new at-large member appointed by the Senate. So the board goes from 14 to 16. And then we, for the first time, say, what are the qualifications to serve on the board? And we say you should have a long time experience and interest in hunting, fishing, trapping, on the hunting side. Also some knowledge of wildlife biology, ecology, habitat, because it's not only about the animals, but it's about the place they live. So there's those qualifications. That's the kind of individual we're looking for. It repeats throughout the bill that there's an emphasis on having science help guide all the decision-making and recommendations out of that board. So that's how we try to get people on the board, what kind of skills and information and background we're looking for. The second thing is the board becomes advisory. The state has hundreds of boards, and those citizen boards, unelected people, advise departments and agencies, but they don't write the laws. And the Fish and Wildlife Board is very unusual. The rules it writes they have force of law. So we said, okay, let's return this to ordinary business, which is agencies and departments will write the law and rules, technically, and the board will advise them. So there's a sort of a rebalancing, sort of modernization, professionalization of that board. The other thing that happens is you have full-time, highly educated people in that Fish and Wildlife Department who are using science to make decisions. So the focus is on science, not sentiment. Doesn't matter if you like or dislike anything. It's let's make it professional and science-based. So that's what happens on the management side. And again, if you came into our committee room, you'd see 10 years ago I wrote up on the board, start with the first week I was chair. There were a lot of sort of whining going on, which was sort of disappointing to me. It's like, wait, aren't we here to think about positive things where we're going? So I came back in the next week and I wrote, start with yes on that whiteboard. And although one somewhat annoying member of the committee has erased it quite a few times, I keep putting it back up there. And this bill is a start with yes bill. It is how can we do better? How can we be more democratic? How can we be more science-based? How can we respectfully include everyone? It's a bill about respect, tolerance, scientific management of wildlife.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, go ahead, please.
My name is Willis Farnham. I live in Middlebury. I'd like to comment about the Fish and Wildlife Board. Those that don't think that non-hunters or non-fishermen belong on it are the same folks that don't think that those that don't have children in the schools should be on school boards. So I'm a lifelong Vermonter. I think we need to expand the board, the Fish and Wildlife Board, to include non-hunters and non-fishermen. I'd also like to comment about education. I started school up in North Troy, Vermont. In 6th grade, I went to, we moved to Chittenden. I would have been in the first class that went to Otter Valley when that opened. I have to tell you, Chittenden didn't want their taxes increased. So what did they do? They eliminated the busing for high school. I don't think you want to do that. I'm also a retired school nurse, health educator, emergency nurse. If you folks have not been in the schools in the past 10 years, you need to go. Remember how we used to be threatened to be sent to the week school? Those kids are now all in classrooms. I would be willing to say that we have at least one special needs child with behavior issues in every classroom there is. That requires another person. If you really want to talk about the school budgets, maybe you ought to talk about eliminating the NEA, because that's where it all starts. And I don't think you want to tangle with them. Personnel is the biggest issue for schools. NEA has the salaries, they have the health care that's written into their contracts, but it's not easy being a school teacher these days. It's very difficult, so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. What is NEA?
Oh. It's a national education, it's the teachers union, basically.
Okay then, thank you. Sorry for not knowing. Mark, do you have a question? Thank you.
Mark Goldman, Addison, Vermont. We talked about the Fish and Wildlife Board, and it was disclosed that all wildlife is held in trust for the people of the state. You're going to have a board, and the question is whether people on the board should be people that are paid in their taxes. That wildlife is raised on my land. I've got 500 acres of land. So, hey, that was pretty quick. I have 500 acres of land that has all the animals on it, this wildlife. Why don't I have a say as to what happens on my land? If I want people to hunt coyotes with dogs, it should be my choice to let them do it. They used to come and they used to ask to hunt coyotes on my land, and I'd say, no. But you can kill as many as you want. Don't hunt them, don't scare them, kill them. None of these people that are advocating for the coyotes have ever come out of their house in the morning and faced coyotes snarling at them, or gone into their barn with coyotes snarling at them. Being attacked or being stalked on your own land by coyotes. As it is now, if I want to go get a firearm, a handgun to put on my hip in those situations, the state has put in a 72-hour hold on my ability to buy a firearm to protect myself on my own property from these state animals. I should have more of a say as to what happens on my land, instead of somebody that lives in an apartment somewhere having an equal voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I guess, Chris, you have any comments?
Thanks, Mark. I mean, there's a few things in there. So I'll start with the gun, the waiting period. That's pretty well established, you know, in terms of that when someone's going to purchase a firearm, that it goes through a federal background check, and that takes a number of days.
No, 2 minutes.
Well, the processing, let me just, okay, there's a processing window. Not everything happens instantly. So I'll just say that that's state law. And in terms of the management of wildlife on your property, you know, in terms of, or who's there doing what, we have the farm that we had, we never posted, and people generally, if they wanted to hunt, they would also stop it and say, I'd like to be up in your woods this year, and we'd say, yes, go ahead, sure. But people have control over their land in terms of posting, so you can post for no trespass, you can post for no hunting, no fishing, no trapping, you can have safety zones for no shooting in a particular area, like around homes and barns. So there's quite a few remedies in law for being able to manage people on your land. And in terms of, I'm sorry that you've had the experience of being, you know, menaced by coyotes. The hunting season for coyotes remains unchanged in the bill, and that is it's 365 days a year, and you can also trap coyotes. So those things remain in terms of provisions around coyotes. And particularly when people have livestock property to protect, if you have animals, or you can take a coyote, usually most people are using a rifle. That's unchanged too. Livestock is, there's never been a change contemplated in the State House while I've been there about not allowing people to protect their home property, livestock, etc. Every day of the year. The last thing is it's recommended to get in touch with the game warden, because game wardens are quite expert and can be helpful in terms of managing a problem like that.
Thank you. Okay. You gotta move the speaker right closer to Chris.
My name is Beth Davis. I live in Shoreham. And I'd like to talk about housing for people with developmental disabilities. We have an adult son who's 41, named Craig, who lives with us because we cannot find housing for him. He is on the autism spectrum, and it's estimated that there are over 600 people, adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities, who cannot find housing in the state of Vermont. There is such a thing as shared living providers here, but there are none right now. Plus, it's not the best solution for many people, including our son. So I would like to advocate for more housing solutions for adults with developmental disabilities in our state. And I know that there is some legislation around that. And I know that we need housing for homeless people, but we also need housing for adults with developmental disabilities. Thank you.
Okay.
So the Natural Resources and Energy Committee has a role on housing in that land use development and planning is an issue that comes before the committee quite regularly. We helped change provisions last year, and the bill number was S100, that changed rules to facilitate the development of more housing. And we're going to be doing more of the same. Housing has become extraordinarily expensive, and it's particularly challenging right now. On top of, we had an unprecedented spike in housing values during COVID. We had a net migration into Vermont on the neighborhood of 10,000 people buying houses, and there are many other places where house prices are substantially higher. So we had people, this is not in any way prejudiced, but it's a fact of life. People were selling houses that yielded enough money to come to Vermont and shop and buy another house. So the market became very tight, and I hardly have heard of a house that didn't sell more for its price that it was listed at. So that's just been, if you're living at the place already, living here, and your income's not changing, and the market's changing and driving prices higher, it makes it even tougher to get into housing. Meanwhile, we've also seen income inequality is at the greatest point since roughly 1929. People's income has not kept pace with costs in general. And then we're seeing a higher mortgage. We had low mortgage rates for an extended period of time. Now that has swung the other way. I think mortgages are up in the neighborhood of 6, 7, and 8%, which has made mortgage payments a lot larger and made housing even more challenging to purchase. The last quick thing, I thank you for speaking about housing. Particularly, it's been my belief for a long time that at the community level, we should have more options for people to stay in their town and once they want to move out of their home and live in a town. So basically senior housing, because I know each town I've lived in, there are people who would love to stay in the town, but there are not that many options to do so, so they stay in their home. They might be the only person in that home. And that's fine, but what's happened in Vermont is that the average number of people in a home has gone down, down, down. So that's the other piece of why we need more housing. If fewer people are housed in each house, you need more houses to cover the same population. So I hope that we see more community housing projects to accommodate all sorts of folks, including seniors who would like to stay in their town when they no longer can or want to manage a whole housing property.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, good morning. I'm Bob Patterson from Lincoln. And I oppose S-258, even with all the recent amendments, and there's been many. This bill sponsored by Senator Ray is simply not necessary. I have spoken to the Senator at length about the harmful effects this bill will have for the future of Vermont's wildlife. As a Fish and Wildlife Board member and a lifelong sportsman, I find it necessary to express my view on 258. It should be understood that currently anyone can apply to be on the board. There is no prohibition about someone who doesn't have a license being on the board. I applied 3 times before I was chosen. The board is made up of a variety of knowledgeable men and women who take the task seriously. I know someone who served on the board who didn't hunt, fish, or trap, although they supported conservation, not preservation. First and foremost, the duty of the board is to conserve the wildlife resource. We should never be pressured into voting on an issue that deviates from that duty. The board has often been criticized for not listening to other views. The board has been nothing but respectful to other views, in my view. Several of the views discussed simply don't fall within the conservation model valued by the board. To conserve means wise use. Special interest groups with predetermined motives should not be allowed to serve on the board. Board members need to be open-minded and conservationists. Board meetings have been attended by as many as 6 different special interest groups. Each of these groups had their agenda that doesn't align with conservation, that does not align with conservation. It's impossible to have an open discussion with these groups such as POW, Protect Our Wildlife. They have stated that all hounds are an issue with all types of hunting and should be banned. They want total bans on their lifestyle, including trapping and hunting coyotes with hounds, and it won't stop there. At one trapping hearing, one person stated, "I don't care what changes you make, I'm against it." How do you work with that mentality? The commissioner placed special interest groups on the Trapping Rules Committee 2 years ago. There was no consensus and only pushback at the meetings and hearings. Vermont currently has the most comprehensive trapping rules in the U.S. using the best management practices. In my view, the board went beyond what was necessary. As a previous board member from Rutland County told me, his life was threatened while being on the board. I received a board email in opposition to trapping, and I try to respond to any emails or any questions I get. I responded with my views, and the first thing I said was, I'm not a trapper, but I supported trapping, and I stated my reasons why. One of the comments back to me was, you, sir, are a mentally sick individual in a 100% pile of shit. I hope you step in your own trap someday and start. Elimination of legal trapping will have a negative impact on the effect and control of the fur bearers with increased number of beavers. This happened in Massachusetts in 1996. Nuisance trapping then increased, requiring everyone to pay for the service. Well, now people aren't paying for the service in most cases. Year-round nuisance trapping means less value for the furs by trapping outside of the prime pelt season. Vermont Agency of Transportation currently contracts 6 trappers to trap beavers where highways are impacted. Contractors have had traps stolen and traps sprung. And where they're springing the trap, they're leaving a blank business card behind just to let somebody know that it's the same person doing that act. Lack of legal trapping will prompt financial losses through decreased license sales. So right now, I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 or so trapping licenses. So these groups, they want to totally eliminate trapping. If that happens, it's going to have a very negative effect both on the wildlife in the state and the financial capability of the state. At our February board meeting, one guest suggested we reintroduce wolves. I heard this for the past 2 years I've been on the board, And here's a good reason not to. In Wisconsin, wolves caused $171,386 worth of damage in 2023. $177,000 damage in the last 5-year period per year. That's average per year. Is the state willing to take on this financial responsibility? Wisconsin compensates owners of livestock only to 70%, not the 100%. And the losses go higher. Cows and calves, beyond the cows and calves, fencing, herd health, and other issues caused by the wolf harassment add to the cost. In my conversation with Senator Brady, he made 2 points for a desire for this bill. One is diversity. He feels non-consumption users who don't hunt, fish, or trap should have a seat at the table. He said that today. Why then would we increase the current 6-year board term to 2 6-year board terms, thereby allowing the public less opportunity to serve? Just doesn't seem to make practical sense. He stated at the meeting there were only he stated at a meeting, I wasn't at this, but I read in the paper that there were only 17,000 hunting licenses issued last year. The number of hunting licenses issued last year was 78,511. Folks like myself don't only experience the woods during the hunting season. We're out there throughout the year. The majority of Vermonters would have no desire to be on the board, but many desiring a board position have anti-motives. The senator also believes there should be more science-based people on the board. The board is made up of a diverse group of men and women with outdoor experience and expertise and conservation in mind. The board makes informed decisions with input from staff and biologists as well as the public. The current version of the bill requires training for board members beyond what is received now, adding additional time and expense. It removes the word abundant from the healthy deer herd and requires annual antlerless deer moose permits numbers to be reported to the Senate on Natural Resources and Energy, his committee. And why? One more page, please.
Okay, please try to wrap it up.
You got enough? All right.
For what over your time?
Okay. I've let a couple people go over a lot of good information, so please limit it to 2 minutes. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Patterson, for your service on that board. As I said, the bill is anti-nothing. I have nothing but respect and appreciation for members of the current board. I've had a short conversation with Mr. Patterson and other members of the board and many people over the last several months. In terms of qualifications, so I'll read from the bill itself. I'm having a little phone difficulty here. Just a second. The point of, so the bill does not, other than, there are no changes to trapping in this bill. I'm not sure why people persist in discussing it as a means of ending trapping. It's just not in the bill. The bill has been, for me, kind of interesting. After 16 years, I've never seen a bill that is more of a ink blot test, a Rorschach test. People are probably familiar with those ink blot tests. They're used, it's an image of nothing, but in the test, people are saying, you ask, like, what do you see in it? It's kind of like looking at clouds and you say, oh, there goes a duck, and so obviously what goes on in those tests is what someone brings to the image is what they see in it. What people bring to this bill is what they see in it. It is often not based on what's actually in the language. The trapping rules that I serve on the board at the legislature that reviewed them, we approved about 99% of those rules. When we talk about the best trapping rules in the United States, I will humbly submit it's the bill I led on 2 years ago that asked for new rules that would bring us up to the highest standards in the U.S. for the trapping that we're continuing to have. So all I can say, it's a little puzzling that from time to time people talk to me about things in that bill that just are not there. And I would say, here we go. For folks who are going to be appointed to the board, we ask that they have awfully small here. We're asking for well, for one thing, there was never an application process before formally. You didn't have to apply. There weren't criteria for selection, and there was not training. So here's the first and maybe foremost, that those who apply or those selected new board members, that the board members need to demonstrate a history of involvement with and dedication to fish and wildlife, including a knowledge of fish and wildlife biology, ecology, and the ethics of fish and wildlife management. So those criteria, I haven't heard anyone say there's anything negative about that. It's actually positive expressions about good backgrounds for anyone on that board to bring to that board. And so I'll stop there. Yeah. The most important word that's not in that bill that I'll repeat again, and I can affirm this word because I wrote the bill. There's all sorts of stories about who wrote that bill. I wrote that bill. And from my heart, I can tell you, it's only intended to make improvements.
Thank you, Chris. Let's kind of stay on topics for just a minute. Is there any more questions about this bill, and then we can move on to some other topics? Okay, then. Go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jean Stone, and I reside in Shoreham. I want to speak about a couple of things. First of all, housing for adults with developmental disabilities is non-existent. And I understand as a state we have to prioritize, and we're trying to do a lot of great things. It's really difficult to manage this. And so our adults that are working, that are paying taxes, and they have some developmental disabilities need support as well. So I would absolutely advocate for the housing for adults with developmental disabilities. I also want to speak about our workforce. So I am the executive director of the Addison County Restorative Justice Services. And the cost of our living in this state is causing our young people, our workers, to move out. We are losing 2 workers. They're going to Georgia. They can buy a house for a third of what they can buy here. And I understand that there's a lot of pieces to that. I just, as a native Vermonter and someone who grew up on a farm, I think that we have to do better to keep our people here. If we don't have a workforce, we're not going to be able to compete. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a comment, or just move on to the next?
Sure, just a quick thing. So last year, there's a category of housing in Vermont referred to as priority housing projects. They have to include at least 20% of the units have to be affordable. Last year in the housing bill, we raised the limits. You could build basically as many priority housing project units and projects without a cap on the number. It used to be set by the population size. We decided it was such a priority that was removed, and those priority housing projects also do not go through Act 250, which some people feel slows things down or adds too much cost, or both. And this year's bill that I've seen coming out of economic development eliminated the category of priority housing projects. I think in committee discussions, we've already talked about keeping those because they are the ones that have at least 20% of the units must be affordable, as opposed to all market-based. Right now, the market is very expensive.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
John Wall from Addison. Just a thought on the housing. We go up to Cook. My wife and I go up to Cookie Love quite a bit in Harrisburg, and Jimmy O's across the street from that has been sitting empty for years. The big place down in Brandon, just going into Brandon, I think is empty. Couldn't the state make some deal with people who own these properties to use these facilities, these buildings, these empty buildings, to start helping solve the housing projects? They're sitting empty. Why can't they be used?
Thanks, John. In fact, we do have programs over the last several years, and there's more in the current housing bill to help convert things like hotels into permanent housing.
Thanks. Sir, up front, thank you.
Hi, Dennis Fillion from Lincoln. I hate to digress back to the bill there, Chris, but my only concern about the bill is the banning of the coyote hunting with dogs. It makes me concerned because where does that stop? We're going to ban hunting rabbits with dogs and upland game with dogs, and that's a concern I have. And anyway, and my other issue is, and I have to write it out here, so pardon me. We already have a law prohibiting sales of tobacco to anyone under 21. So why are we trying to ban flavored tobacco as a way of preventing natural or this addiction for young people when it's already 21? 21, you should be able to do what you want. If you don't think, and don't you think it's hypocritical if we okay sales of edible marijuana products to people 21? I'm assuming that if you're 21, the way that these young kids are getting flavored tobacco is someone's giving it to them. So couldn't that happen with marijuana products? And those are chocolatey and edibles and all that, so is that kind of hypocritical? Anyway, that's my problem. And my other part is, did you use statistics, you meaning the legislature, of actual Vermont use that use flavored tobaccos to make your decisions? And what evidence is there that banning flavored tobaccos makes a difference at all? I mean, they're still young. Flavored tobaccos haven't been out that long, especially the new ones. Or is this just another government oversight? That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. You need to get more help up here.
So I wish, Dennis, I could answer more fully the questions about flavored tobaccos. I'm not on the Health and Welfare Committee, which has spent not just this session, but I think years looking into the issue. In general, cigarette smoking can become addictive, and there's many negative health consequences of smoking. It is, as you point out, a personal choice. Part of the committee's work focused on like menthol products is that those products have a way of making it, sort of, I suppose, easier to, I'm not a smoker, so I can't speak to it directly, but as I understand it, makes the smoke sort of easier, less bothersome to your throat, etc., and also, I don't know if the flavors are attractive. Whatever it is, that it ends up, it is kind of treated as a way to get more people smoking. And it apparently does, there is plenty of data to demonstrate that menthol products are kind of a way into smoking for many people. And because of the negative health consequences, it ends up costing Vermonters at large and the state hundreds of millions of dollars a year in terms of health care. The state has chosen the path of trying to reduce the number of people smoking. That's what's behind that. On the coyote hounding piece, I think one thing we haven't talked at all about is private property rights, which are Article 1, Chapter 1 of the Vermont Constitution, one of the first things named. And there are many people who feel, not just feel, that have experienced their private property rights violated by hounds running loose and quite literally out of control. I spent 10 years with hounds on training GPS collars, and they also could shock and train and all the rest. But those are a training tool. They have limited influence over hounds. When hounds are out of sight and at a distance, these things work up to 9 miles away. Whoever owns that hound, they do not know what that hound is doing. They may keep tracking where it goes, but as a number of private property owners who have had bad experiences with hounds in terms of spooking livestock, scared, people who feel like they can't be in their yard on Saturdays with their young children because they've had hounds come through that sort of swarmed them and then moved on. So feeling threatened on your own property by loose hounds, I love hounds, but you need to have them under your control. And GPS collars at a distance don't meet any straight-faced definition I know of control. You know where they are. You don't know what quarry they are. They also run other wildlife. They can be running deer. No one will know. So it's just not it's not a well-managed and responsible way to live with other people, to have your hounds on their property. A number of people who have all expressed concerns about it have been told by hound hunters they had posted their property, which they didn't like to do because they like to keep it open, but they said, well, I have to post, so be it, in order to maintain my own property rights. They've had the unfortunate experience, numerous times I've heard this story from people directly, that they were told by the hounders who eventually came by that hounds can't read. So that is not a neighborly answer. That's not a responsible answer. And so the banning of hunting hounds with coyotes is to protect others who don't want to participate in the activity and have the right to control their own private property. Again, coyotes can be hunted 365 days a year. Hound hunting with coyotes is not a coyote management technique. Mr. Patterson, I think, can probably tell you a lot more detail than I, but I've spent quite a bit of time talking with fish and wildlife people. But the coyote population is between 6,000 and 9,000 in the state. It is self-maintaining. Hunting and trapping have little to no influence on the size of that population. It's prey dependent, so they eat everything from mice to fawns or calves even. There are conflicts that happen with calves that are born in a field and taken by coyotes.
And in the barn.
Okay, and in Mr. Rogan's experience, in the barn. But it is not coyote hounding that manages that population. It is, as the former commissioner of the Fish and Wildlife Department explained to me a number of times, the reason to have a 365-day-a-year season is so that when coyotes are on someone's property, they can take that coyote and make coyotes wary of being at that property. And that, as Louis Bohr used to say, we won't have conflicts if we don't have, if we keep coyotes wary. So that's why there's an open season, and that's why, so I'll just stop it.
Okay, thank you. Mark, do you have a question on this topic?
On the same topic.
Okay, maybe after this, we can try to get on to another topic if it's possible, please.
We can do that too. But not going to change the population of coyotes, but my goal is to have them fearful of buildings and people. Are we going to wait till some kid comes out of the house and is attacked by a coyote? I don't want to see that day. Now, on a separate topic, talk about taxes. On the radio, I heard that there's a movement to affect how property tax sales occur. There should be a limit as to how long they can wait. They have to wait before they conduct a property tax sale, but before the town can do that. I appealed my taxes. I lost. My taxes went up because they used the current common level of appraisal against the value for the previous years while the tax was under appeal. I got a bill from the town. The court had said that I had to deal strictly with the lawyer for anything to do with taxes, so I paid the bill on the 15th day. That's the day that it was due that I had to appeal. and I delivered it to the lawyer's office. He was on a 6 weeks vacation. He came back, and when the 30 days after the bill was sent out, the next day, the town put my property up for sale. That is retribution for my engaging in lawful constitutional right to appeal my taxes. I could have taken them to court, but the whole value was about $37. And I would have been entitled to triple damages, which would have been less than $100. I figured it wasn't worth it, so I paid it. But when the lawyer came back and had delivered the check to the town and certified that I had paid him in time, but yet I had the $100 of interest and penalties for failing to pay my tax on time, and it went to, notice was given out for a property tax sale. All my mortgagers wanted to foreclose immediately. This was retribution. We need in the property tax sale that no sale can happen unless the tax is over 2 years in arrears. Thank you. Now, in regard to the CLA, we're going to have a lot of tax increases based on a few sales, and the people whose property values have not gone up are going to have their taxes go up a whole lot. The common level of appraisal, the way it's done, the way it's calculated, is unconstitutional also, and I'm willing to discuss with anybody on why. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on taxes? Or is that a town issue, or?
As for coyote, someone coming out of the house and being attacked by a coyote, I'd say, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't heard of that experience, although I have talked to people who have had coyotes too close by, and since they were not themselves a hunter, didn't have a rifle, they had someone come over and help them. But I would also always suggest in that case contacting Fish and Game warden, game warden. As for, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to comment on any particular case. It's a question of municipal law. If it seems unfairly structured, then I'm happy to, if you can point me to where you see that flaw. If it exists in state code, especially in state law, I can look into it further. Maybe you can fill me in before we leave, Mark.
Thank you. Is there another topic we'd like to get onto? Annie?
Good morning. I'm Annie Wilson. I'm from Cornwall. And what I wanted to comment on was the Bill S-151. The person, Chairman Jimmy Lyons, is in charge of that bill up at the State House. Our Senator Hardy and Senator Gulick tried to convince her to stop working on this bill because it's a waste of time. It's probably not going to pass. And yet, what's the bill about? Well, the part that concerns me is that they want to give 12-year-olds age of consent. I am a teacher, or ex-retired teacher. I've worked with 12-year-olds, and they can't make those kind of decisions that this bill indicates. It's to give them permission to get vaccinations, STD, hormone therapy, without parental consent. If I were a parent of a 12-year-old, I would want to know what my kid's doing in school. I would not want this child to have these vaccinations without me knowing it. And this bill promotes that. It lowers the age of consent to 12. What is the intent of that? What's going to happen? What are the ramifications of that? And Senator Hardy was trying to get Jenny Lyons to just drop this bill. Stop wasting our time. She had actually said in a meeting to stop wasting our time and work on things that need to be worked on. And yet Jenny Lyons will not listen to our own Senator Hardy on this matter. So my concern is about that. There's a lot of stuff in the bill which I'm not really even looking at. I'm just looking at the age consent. It's wrong. It should not happen.
Okay, thank you. You know about that bill, Chris, or? I hate to keep putting you on the spot, but you're the only one that can chew.
All I can say is I share your concerns.
Thank you. Is there another topic that we want to get on? We have about 10 more minutes here. Okay, Andy, get back up.
Can I just say one more thing? Can you, can us in this room just write to Jenny Lyons and those that are in charge of working on this bill and say, we're against this, stop this, it's crazy. Can we just do
Who is
that?
Jenny Lyons?
She's the, Chris, can you?
Sure. Her name is Virginia Lyons, Ginny Lyons, Lyons. She is chair of the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. You can, there's a great legislative website that provides you access to all bills from introduction right on through passage. Every committee has a page, so you can follow the development of a bill. You can also see all the written testimony that comes into that committee. You can also stream it live as it happens, and it's also recorded so that if you're curious about while you were at work, what happened this morning in health and welfare. It's 8 o'clock at night. You can click on a YouTube video and watch the committee hearing as well. So if you just Google Vermont Legislature, you'll find the home website, and you can find all the bills, all the testimony, drafts of bills, the calendar for what's coming to the House or Senate floor, and the journal which says what happened on the House or Senate floor.
Thank you for that useful information. Hopefully everybody.
And a link and information on how to reach every member of the General Assembly, their email addresses.
So if you have any questions, start emailing. Is there another topic that we'd like to get on? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Kenyon. I'm from Bridgeport. And this is, as I feel, it's either the third or the fourth time I've asked Chris this question, so there'd be no surprise. My concern is, and some of my experience, is to do with climate change, so this is a climate change question. The discussion of climate change and the way in which we have decided to approach this is going to be extraordinarily expensive. If you folks are worried about costs now, take a look at what happens with your electricity bills in a short period of time as we go through renewables to try to achieve getting free of fossil fuels by 2035. I'm no friend of fossil fuels, but we need a different solution, I think. Anyway, I have been asking for the fundamental data that supports the premise that CO2 is the primary driver of Earth's climate. I've never seen it. The National Climate Assessment Report doesn't include this. There are lots of words in there of people who claim to know about this, but there's no data. I have heard that the data doesn't exist, and as I've looked over the last 20 years, I've not seen it. So, as any engineer would know, to accomplish an enormous engineering project, which this switch away from fossil fuels will be and is, you need two things. You need the data that proves the problem to be solved is real, and you need the data that proves that your solution is well supported by data. I've seen none of these things happen yet. We don't even have a demonstration project that shows that that a community run on renewable energies actually works. So I think there's a whole lot of rethinking that needs to be done. Simply, for the moment, I'd like to have the data that shows that CO2 is the primary climate change driver. I've asked a few times and I get silence as a result. So I would like to hear back, yes, Chris, I will get you that information. Yes, we need it before you move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So if you will do me the kindness of emailing me, so I make sure I have your current email address, and it will also be a helpful reminder, so thanks for that. I'll be happy to get data and share it with you. I think that the state has some data, but there's also the International Panel on Climate Change, and so like at the highest level, my understanding is that something on the order of 99% of the scientists working in this area see the relationship between emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and climate change. So it's, to the best of my knowledge, it's relatively settled science, but science is always asking questions, trying to learn more. It's good to maintain a healthy skepticism. So I'll watch for your email, and I will try to connect mostly through the Agency on Natural Resources, which really does the frontline work on this, to get information to you. I don't know if this is the last time I stand up today, so I want to remember to say something to the hunting, fishing, trapping community that might be good news to them. The governor proposed closing the Salisbury fish hatchery, and I've been working with the chair of Senate Institutions and the chair of Appropriations. There's now a bill to keep that facility up and running for years.
Thank you for that good news, Chris, or hopefully good news. Is there another topic or two? We got time for a couple more questions, and then we'll wind up this legislative breakfast. Don't everybody jump up at once, come on. Any thoughts or concerns or anything you'd like to share with Chris that he can bring back to his colleagues? Okay, yeah, go. Yeah, go ahead, miss. Thank you.
I just think that with all the legislators in Addison County, I would like to see them attend the legislative breakfast. If it wasn't for Chris Bray, we wouldn't have a breakfast, I don't think. And I think we need to encourage, we've got one more, 2 weeks in Weybridge. And I think we should encourage our legislators to be there.
Maybe right out for Again, I was going to save it till the end of the meeting. I would like to tell Chris, thank you. We don't always agree, but I do have respect for you coming here and always shouldering the whole burden. I can't say burden, but the whole thing yourself. And again, thank you. And I know you're put on the spot, and I wish other people were put on the spot. So one more question here.
Ready to go back up. By the way, I looked up some stats, and I believe Vermont is the lowest per capita CO2 producer in the nation, by far. So we don't hardly produce any as it is. Whatever that. Anyway, the Tax Foundation ranks Vermont the 6th highest overall tax system in America. Rocket Mortgage ranks Vermont 4th highest in property tax burden. We're also the 14th highest sales tax, not including local taxes. In 2021, Vermont budget ranked #1 in the U.S. in the percent spending on welfare, education, higher education, police, and roads. I believe in social programs, truly, but not sometimes at the level of the financial burdens that the legislature puts on people. At least I don't. I don't think the majority of Vermonters wants or can afford the government to continue to raise the level of financing of programs in the belief that we should be the role model for the rest of the world. That's just my belief. My question is, what are you doing to ease the tax burden of hard-working, tax-paying Vermonters?
Thank you for the question, and you're pointing out one of the fundamental. I serve on the tax committee. In the House, it's called Ways and Means. In the Senate, it's called Finance. And so I think it's actually one of the most interesting and challenging committees to serve on, because we see many, many proposals to raise taxes. That's what comes through every single day, revenue generating bills. And the question is, what do we want to invest in together as I'll just say, Vermont is so small, as a community, a state, what do we want to do for ourselves? And, I have my concerns as well about how affordable is it? Where are we? It's always bad news to see a figure like we're the highest on X, Y, or Z tax. We also end up being one of the safest states to live in. We also happen to be one of the cleanest states to live in. We also happen to be one of the healthiest states to live in. So we always are weighing out investments. What's affordable? What do we want for ourselves? And but I do share the concern that there are a lot of people who are strained right now by the level of tax paid. So, thank you.
Chris, I guess I'll end up with the last question here. And I got friends of mine in the town of New Haven, Rich and Marcus Sprague. They have a small cottage or cabin. They rent as an Airbnb. They've tried renting it out. They've had bad things with tenants there, destroying their house and everything. Now there's a proposed 10% increase in their tax. And they don't support it. They go, they're providing a service to the community because there isn't enough housing or hotel space for people to come to Vermont. They're spending their money in Vermont and they don't feel like they should be paying this 10% tax. And will that also affect short-term rentals for like traveling nurses and everything that have a hard time finding a place?
Yes, Charles, I haven't seen this bill yet, so I don't know the ins and outs of the discussion around adding a tax to the rental fee or the overnight fee, whatever, for short-term rentals. I think they're getting a little bit of a bad deal, you know, in terms of people. Some people are seeing the conversion. I mean, this has happened. There are people who say, oh, when I rented it as an apartment, sometimes I have bad tenants, it was hard to get rid of them, they damaged the place, etc. Why don't I stop having tenants and I'll just turn it into a short-term rental, and it turns out to actually be generally more profitable as well. So there is concern that too many former apartments are now being turned into short-term rentals, exacerbating the housing crisis that we have. So I think there's a legitimate concern on that side. But you know, there's another way of looking at it, and that is that there are people who want to generally visit Vermont, or traveling nurses, I think, are sort of a special situation these days. They need a place to stay. What's the downside of providing that housing, you know, as temporary as it is? Especially when people are coming in from out of state. We're a big recreation and tourism state, so there's a benefit to the state of having people show up, rent a place, they're spending money on that rental, they may well be going out to eat, you know, buying a ski ticket or getting a fishing license, whatever they do while they're here. So I just want to make sure whenever we talk about these things in general, I'm feeling like I want to, as I have with the Fish and Wildlife Bill, have conversations, learn from people, come to legislative breakfast, and be able to try to understand the story more carefully. When I was in my 20s, I worked for Bob Twitchell down in Southern Vermont logging for a year, and we were a crew of 2 on a lot of days. So either I was running skidder or he was running skidder, and the other person was cutting. And felling the old-fashioned way, not with modern equipment, is dangerous work. And he said, before you drop a tree, always walk at least once around it. Keep your eye, look up, look for widowmakers, loose branches that can fall down and hit you. And because I was working by myself, I walked twice around every tree before dropping it. And that I still keep that in my head as a touchstone for working on legislation. I like to walk at least twice around that bill before ever taking action, because there's more than one way to look at everything we do over there.
All right, thank you. Okay. And we're going to wind this up after this. Thank you.
Well, as a landlord, I have found out that the landlords have absolutely no rights. We've been supporting a squatter all winter. we've had to take out of our savings to support these people. And they have gone and, of course, legal aid and renters' rights. Landlords have no rights. And that's why people are not renting out on long term. When these people get out of my house, I'm selling the damn thing. And I hope that it's not a very high class rental, and the rent rate was commensurate with the condition of the house. And I'm hoping that we can find some young person who can find a job that pays more than $17 an hour. And with respect, to be able to afford my house, and we can contribute to the economy. There's no way in hell I will ever rent that house again because of all the rental rights. And I noticed the legislature was trying to enhance the tenants' rights. So they're shooting themselves in the foot about housing and rentals. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. The next meeting, I believe, is in 2 weeks, and it's in Weybridge. Hopefully you're all there, and Chris can pass a message on that we'd like to see more people. And I bet you he wants to see more people.